The war's endless toll. The galaxy was at its breaking point. For decades, an endless war had consumed the stars, leaving behind nothing but devastation and despair. Entire planets were reduced to ash. Millions of lives lost in battles that seemed to stretch on forever. The Krell Dominion, an empire of unmatched ruthlessness, had expanded its grasp, crushing all who opposed it. Their fleets were vast, their soldiers relentless, and their technology seemingly unstoppable. The galaxy's allied forces, a fragile coalition of diverse species, fought back with everything they had. But it was never enough. On the edge of a shattered star system, the Galactic Council gathered for an emergency meeting. Representatives from the surviving member species sat in a dimly lit chamber, their faces drawn with exhaustion and defeat. The air was heavy with tension as they argued over their dwindling options. "This war cannot continue," growled Counselor Vera of the Corinthians, her scaled hands clenched into fists. "Our fleets are scattered. Our people are starving. If we do not find a way to end this, the Krell will destroy us all." "We have tried everything," snapped Counselor Reagan of the Trilaxians, his large, fur-covered frame shaking with frustration. "Peace negotiations, surprise attacks, defensive strategies. None of it works. The Krell are too strong." A heavy silence fell over the room. Each counselor bore the weight of countless lives on their shoulders, and each knew they were running out of time. It was then that Counselor Adrian of the Voltarians spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "There is one option we have not yet tried," he said, his silver eyes gleaming in the dim light. "We could ask the humans for help." The room erupted in chaos. Counselors shouted over one another, their voices filled with disbelief and anger. "The humans? Are you mad?" Vera spat. "They've refused every call for aid since this war began. They hide behind their isolation, watching as we suffer." "Exactly," Reagan added, his voice thick with contempt. "Why should we trust a species that cares nothing for the galaxy?" Adrian raised a hand, silencing the room. "I understand your doubts, but think about it. Humanity's technology is unmatched. Their history is filled with tales of overcoming impossible odds. If anyone can turn the tide of this war, it's them." The counselors exchanged uneasy glances. Humanity was a mystery to most of the galaxy. They had once been explorers, spreading across the stars with boundless curiosity. But after a devastating conflict centuries ago, they had withdrawn to their corner of the galaxy, cutting off almost all contact. Rumors swirled about their advancements, their power, and their reasons for isolation, but no one truly knew the extent of their capabilities. Finally, Counselor Vera spoke, her voice reluctant. "If we reach out to the humans, and they refuse, we will have wasted precious time we do not have." "And if they agree?" Adrian countered, his tone sharp. "If they join us, we might finally have a chance to win." The room fell silent once more. One by one, the counselors nodded, though their faces remained grim. A message was drafted and sent to Earth, a desperate plea for help. Days passed with no response, and hope began to waver. Some counselors whispered that the humans had abandoned them, just as they had feared. Others clung to the possibility that Earth might yet answer. Then, one fateful day, a signal arrived. The Galactic Council convened in haste, their hearts pounding with anticipation. The holographic image of a human appeared before them, a figure clad in a sleek, dark uniform, their face calm and composed. "I am Ambassador Kell of Earth," the human began, their voice steady and commanding. "We have received your message and understand your plight." The counselors leaned forward, their breaths held. "Humanity will join your fight," Kell continued, "but under one condition. We will take full command of the war effort. Our strategy, our terms. You will follow our lead without question." Gasps and murmurs filled the chamber. Counselor Reagan rose to his feet, his fur bristling. "You expect us to hand over control of our fleets to you? This is outrageous." Kell's gaze was unwavering. You called for our help because you are losing. We do not enter battles we cannot win, and we will not waste time debating tactics. Accept our terms, or continue your fight without us." The counselors exchanged troubled looks. The demand was bold, even arrogant, but the humans' confidence was undeniable. They had a choice to make: risk everything by trusting humanity, or face certain destruction at the hands of the Krell. Finally, Counselor Adrian stood. "We accept your terms," he said, his voice heavy with resignation. "May your actions prove as decisive as your words." Kale nodded. "Prepare your fleets. When humanity joins the war, it will not last long." As the hologram faded, the counselors sat in stunned silence. Questions swirled in their minds. Why had humans waited so long to act? What were they planning? And most importantly, could they truly deliver on their bold promise? In the quiet that followed, one thought echoed in every mind. The humans had finally joined the war, and the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity's entry. The Galactic Council had reluctantly accepted the humans' terms, though doubt hung heavy in the air. Whispers spread like wildfire among the Allied fleets. Soldiers speculated about Earth's mysterious technology, while commanders fretted over surrendering control. Few believed that humanity, absent from galactic affairs for centuries, could make a difference in a war that had consumed the galaxy for decades. The first sign of humanity's entry came as a ripple across the cosmos, a fleet of ships emerging from hyperspace, cutting through the void with precision. The vessels were unlike anything the Council had ever seen. They were not massive like the dreadnoughts of the Krell or ornate like the flagship of the Voltarians. Instead, they were sleek, almost minimalist, their matte black hulls absorbing light as if refusing to be seen. "Those are the human warships." Commander Urel of the Tralaxian Navy scoffed, his fur rippling in disdain. "They're so small. Do they plan to fight the Krell with scouts?" The skepticism was shared across the Allied forces. The human fleet, though compact, exuded an eerie confidence. Unlike the chaotic chatter common among coalition vessels, the human comm channels were silent, their movements impossibly coordinated. From aboard the flagship Resolve, Ambassador Kale transmitted a brief message to the Council. His calm voice echoed through the chambers. "Our fleet is in position. Hold your forces back and await instructions." The blunt command sparked immediate outrage among the counselors. "Hold back," barked Counselor Reagan, slamming a fist on the table. "Our soldiers have fought and died for this war. We won't stand aside while humans play saviors." Cal's expression remained unchanged. "Do as we say, or be prepared to explain to your people why their sacrifice was wasted." The Council fumed, but they had no choice. With great reluctance, the Allied fleets withdrew to defensive positions, their captains watching the human ships with equal parts curiosity and disdain. As the fleets prepared, the Krell Dominion took notice. Their flagship, the Oblivion's Edge, loomed on the horizon of the battlefield like a predator stalking its prey. The Krell commander, General Threx, sneered as reports of the human fleet reached his bridge. "Humans," he growled, his voice a low rumble. "I thought they had more sense than to join this doomed alliance." "Should we prepare the fleet for engagement?" asked his lieutenant, a wiry creature with too many eyes and a nervous twitch. "No," Threx replied, a cruel grin spreading across his face. "Let them come. We will crush their pathetic ships and send their wreckage back to Earth as a warning." But humanity's next move caught both allies and enemies off guard. Instead of advancing, the human fleet deployed dozens of small, spherical drones, which floated silently into the void. The Krell laughed, assuming them to be primitive probes, but the allies watched in confusion. "What are they doing?" Urel muttered, his claws tapping nervously on his console. The answer came in an instant. The drones activated, emitting pulses of energy that rippled across the battlefield. Krell ships suddenly lost power, their engines sputtering as systems went offline. Even the massive Oblivion's Edge shuddered, its shields flickering. "What is happening?" Threx roared, slamming his fists onto the command console. His crew scrambled to diagnose the problem, but the answer was clear. The humans had neutralized their fleet's technology. On the Resolve, Kale observed the chaos with a calm detachment. Turning to his tactical officer, he gave a single nod. Begin Phase 1. The human ships moved in perfect unison, their sleek forms darting through the Krell lines like predators in a school of fish. Their weapons, though smaller than the Krell's heavy artillery, were devastatingly precise. Each shot found its mark, targeting critical systems and disabling ships without unnecessary destruction. From the sidelines, the Allied forces watched in stunned silence. This was no ordinary battle. It was a surgical strike, each move calculated to perfection. "They're not fighting a war," Counselor Vera whispered, her eyes wide. "They're dismantling it." As ship after ship fell, the Krell scrambled to regroup. General Threx, his arrogance now replaced with desperation, barked orders to his remaining fleet. But no matter what tactics they employed, the humans seemed to predict their every move. "Impossible," Threx hissed. "How can they know?" Before he could finish, his flagship was hit with a disabling strike. The bridge plunged into darkness as the ship's systems failed one by one. For the first time in his long and brutal career, Threx felt fear. On the Allied side, disbelief turned to awe. The humans were not just winning. They were dominating. Their fleet was smaller, their numbers fewer, but their precision and efficiency were unmatched. As the final Krell ships began to retreat, a transmission from Kale played across all Allied channels. His voice, calm and unwavering, carried a weight that silenced even the most skeptical listeners. "This is not a war we intend to prolong," he said. "Follow our lead, and this conflict will be over in 5 hours." The Allied commanders exchanged looks of disbelief. 5 hours? It seemed impossible. But as they watched the humans methodically dismantle the Krell forces, a new thought began to take hold. Perhaps the impossible was exactly what humanity had planned all along. The first strike. The battlefield was eerily silent. The once dominant Krell dominion, infamous for their brutal war cries and overwhelming firepower, were now reduced to scattered, disabled ships drifting helplessly in the void. Allied forces watched in awe as the humans prepared for their next move. From the command deck of the human flagship, Resolve, Kale stood with his hands clasped behind his back. The glow of the holographic battlefield illuminated his face as he surveyed the chaos. His officers, calm and efficient, awaited his next command. No one questioned him. No one hesitated. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't just their technology, it was their unity. "Activate the grid," Kale ordered, his voice even. Across the human fleet, hundreds of drones deployed in perfect synchronization. They formed a massive web, creating an invisible energy field that encased the battlefield. The grid hummed with latent power, its purpose unclear to both allies and enemies. On board the Oblivion's Edge, General Threx snarled, his clawed hands gripping the edge of his console. His once imposing fleet was in shambles, and his pride was crumbling by the second. "What is that?" Threx barked, pointing at the glowing energy field forming around his forces. We don't know, General," stammered his tactical officer, his many eyes darting nervously across his screen. "Our scanners can't penetrate it." "Then destroy it," Threx roared. The remaining Krell ships opened fire, their massive cannons targeting the drones creating the grid. But every shot was intercepted by human countermeasures. Small interceptor drones moved with blinding speed, creating protective barriers that rendered the Krell's attacks useless. The grid completed its formation, and a low hum resonated through the battlefield. For a moment, everything stopped. Then, with a pulse of light, the grid activated, sending waves of energy rippling through space. Krell ships began to react violently, their systems overloading. Engines burst into flames, weapons malfunctioned, and shields collapsed. Inside the Allied command ship, Commander Rell watched in stunned silence. They're not destroying them," he murmured, his voice filled with disbelief. "They're disabling them." The Krell ships were not being annihilated. Instead, they were rendered powerless, left drifting in the void like lifeless husks. The human fleet moved with precision, weaving through the chaos and targeting any ships that attempted to escape. The Allied commanders, watching from the sidelines, couldn't believe their eyes. This was no ordinary attack. Humanity wasn't just fighting the Krell. They were dismantling them with precision that bordered on surgical. On board the Resolve, Cal's tactical officer turned to him. "Phase 1 complete, sir. All Krell ships within the grid are neutralized." Cal gave a slight nod. "Proceed to Phase 2. At that moment, the humans unleashed their true secret weapon. From the belly of the Resolve, a single ship emerged. It was small, unassuming, and unlike any vessel the Allied forces had ever seen. The ship glided effortlessly through the grid, its surface shimmering with a strange energy. "What is that?" Counselor Vera whispered, her eyes fixed on the screen. As the mysterious ship approached the center of the Krell fleet, it emitted a low-frequency pulse. The pulse spread across the battlefield, passing harmlessly through Allied ships but causing Krell vessels to convulse violently. Inside their ships, Krell soldiers fell to the ground, clutching their heads in agony. The pulse wasn't destroying technology. It was targeting the Krell themselves. Threx's vision blurred as the pulse hit his ship. He stumbled, gripping the edge of his console for support. What is this?" he gasped, his voice trembling. On board the Resolve, Cal's voice was cold and unyielding. "We warned you. This war ends on our terms." The Krell forces were now completely incapacitated. Their ships floated lifelessly, their soldiers unable to fight. The grid had done its job, creating an environment where humanity could neutralize their enemies without resorting to total annihilation. The Allied forces, still in shock, watched as the human fleet moved methodically to capture the disabled Krell ships. It was a sight no one had ever expected. A war being won with minimal destruction and no unnecessary loss of life. As the last Krell ship was subdued, Cal transmitted a message to the Allied commanders. His tone was calm, but his words carried a weight that silenced all doubts. "This is not the end," Cal said. "The Krell will not stop unless we take the fight to them. Prepare your forces. The next phase begins in 1 hour." The Allies, though still wary, could no longer deny humanity's effectiveness. The humans had done in a matter of hours what no coalition fleet had accomplished in decades. But as they prepared for the next stage of the battle, one question lingered in their minds. If humanity was this powerful, what would happen if they ever turned their sights on the rest of the galaxy? The clock was ticking. Humanity had promised to end the war in 5 hours. And so far, they were keeping their word. The Krell's reaction. The remnants of the Krell Dominion's once mighty fleet drifted helplessly within the confines of the grid. Their soldiers, incapacitated by the human pulse weapon, were powerless to resist as their ships were methodically captured. But even as their forces crumbled, the Krell command refused to bow. In the heart of the flagship Oblivion's Edge, General Threx paced like a caged predator. His crimson scales gleamed under the dim emergency lights, his golden eyes burning with rage. For the first time in his illustrious and brutal career, he was faced with an enemy he couldn't understand. "They dare to humiliate us like this," he snarled, his voice a low growl that reverberated through the bridge. "A species that has hidden in the shadows for centuries dares to challenge the might of the Dominion." His tactical officer, still recovering from the effects of the human pulse, hesitated before speaking. "General, their tactics, their technology. It's unlike anything we've encountered. We need time to adapt." "Time." Threx slammed his clawed hand onto the console, causing sparks to fly. "The Dominion does not need time. We take what we want, when we want it. And now we will remind these humans why the Krell have ruled the galaxy." Threx turned to his communications officer, a nervous figure with translucent skin and shifting patterns of light. Send the signal. Deploy the obliterator. A hush fell over the bridge. The obliterator was the Krell Dominion's most devastating weapon, a forbidden device capable of annihilating entire star systems. It was a weapon of last resort, a testament to the Krell's belief that no defeat was ever final. "But General," the officer stammered, "using the obliterator will." "Do it," Threx roared, his eyes narrowing. "We will show the humans that their precision and strategy are nothing against the raw power of the Dominion." The officer hesitated for only a moment before transmitting the signal. Deep within a hidden sector of the battlefield, a massive structure began to unfold. It was a monstrous, spherical device bristling with energy conduits and pulsing with raw power. The obliterator had been activated. On the bridge of the Resolve, Kale observed the unfolding events with quiet intensity. The holographic display showed the obliterator powering up, its energy signature growing exponentially. "Tactical report," Kale ordered. His tactical officer, a young woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind, responded immediately. "The device appears to be a planet destroyer. Its energy output suggests it can destabilize the core of any celestial body within range. It's charging rapidly." Kale nodded, his expression unreadable. "Time to full activation." Less than 10 minutes. Kale turned to his communications officer. "Send a message to the Allied fleet. Maintain defensive positions and await further orders. Do not engage." The Allied commanders, already uneasy with the humans' unconventional methods, were quick to voice their concerns. "What is that thing?" Commander Drell demanded over the comms. "And why aren't we stopping it?" "We are stopping it," Kale replied calmly, "but not with brute force." The Allied forces had no choice but to trust him, though doubts lingered. Meanwhile, the human fleet began a series of synchronized movements, their ships positioning themselves around the obliterator. "What are they doing?" Counselor Vera muttered, her scaled hands gripping the armrests of her chair. On the battlefield, humanity's next move unfolded. Dozens of specialized human ships, each equipped with advanced shielding systems, created a barrier around the obliterator. As the device's energy output surged, the ships absorbed and redirected the energy, creating a cascading feedback loop. Inside the Oblivion's edge, Threx's command crew stared at their monitors in disbelief. "General, the obliterator's energy levels are destabilizing," one of the officers cried. "The humans are. They're feeding its power back into itself." Threx's jaw tightened as he watched his ultimate weapon falter. "Impossible," he muttered, his voice shaking with rage. "No one can counter our technology like this." On board the Resolve, Kel's tactical officer reported, "Energy levels critical. The obliterator will collapse in 90 seconds." Kel's gaze remained fixed on the display. "Prepare to neutralize the remaining Krell fleet. The moment their weapon is neutralized, they'll attempt to flee." The obliterator, overloaded with its own energy, began to implode. A massive shockwave rippled through the battlefield, but the human grid absorbed the blast, shielding both the Allied fleets and the surrounding systems from harm. As the dust settled, the battlefield fell silent once more. The Krell fleet, now leaderless and scattered, scrambled to regroup. But the humans were already in position, their ships cutting off every possible escape route. On the bridge of the Oblivion's edge, Threx stood motionless. His ultimate weapon had been defeated, his fleet decimated. Yet his pride refused to allow surrender. "General," his communications officer said hesitantly, "the Allied forces are hailing us. They're demanding your unconditional surrender." Threx's claws dug into the console as he hissed, "Surrender? Never." But before he could issue his next command, a human voice echoed across the bridge. It was Kale, speaking directly to the Krell leader. "General Threx," Kale said, his tone calm but firm, "your weapon is gone. Your fleet is defeated. Continuing this fight will only lead to the complete annihilation of your forces. Surrender now, and we will ensure your soldiers are treated with dignity." Threx snarled but remained silent. His mind raced, searching for a way out, but the cold reality was undeniable. The humans had won. "Your pride has cost you enough," Kel continued. "Don't let it cost your people their future." For the first time in his life, Threx felt the weight of defeat. The decision was his to make, but the galaxy had already witnessed the answer. Humanity had joined the war, and the Krell Dominion would never be the same. The turning point. The battlefield lay in eerie silence, a graveyard of disabled Krell ships surrounded by the unwavering human fleet. The Allied forces watched in stunned awe, still grappling with the impossibility of what they had just witnessed. The Krell Dominion, once the galaxy's most feared power, had been brought to its knees in mere hours. Yet the humans were far from finished. On the command deck of the Resolve, Kale stood motionless, his sharp eyes fixed on the holographic display. The Krell fleet, battered and leaderless, hovered at the edge of the grid like a wounded predator, still dangerous despite its injuries. Kal's officers moved with silent efficiency, their focus unshaken. "Status report," Kale said, his voice steady. "Remaining Krell forces are attempting to regroup," replied his tactical officer. "Their flagship, Oblivion's Edge, still holds operational capacity, but its systems are heavily compromised. General Threx hasn't transmitted a surrender signal." Kale nodded, his expression unreadable. "He won't. Not yet." Across the Allied fleets, doubt began to creep into the minds of the commanders. The Krell had been subdued, but for how long? The humans' cold, calculated approach had proven effective, but their motives remained unclear. Commander Urel, his fur bristling with unease, opened a private channel to the human flagship. "Ambassador Kale, what is your next move? The Krell are weakened, but they're not finished. Should we prepare for an all-out assault?" Kal's voice came through the calm and resolute. "No, that would be a waste of resources." Urel bristled. "A waste? They're still a threat." "They're an opportunity," Kale countered. "Our goal isn't just to defeat the Krell. It's to ensure they never rise again." Urel fell silent, uncertain whether to admire or fear the human's confidence. Inside the Oblivion's Edge, chaos reigned. General Threx's officers scrambled to restore order, but their leader was uncharacteristically still. He stood at the bridge's viewport, staring out at the grid that had trapped his fleet like an invisible cage. "General," one of his officers said hesitantly, "the humans are broadcasting a message. Should we?" "Play it," Threx growled, his voice low. The human ambassador's image appeared on the main screen. Kal's gaze was piercing, his words sharp. "General Threx," Kale began, "your forces are defeated, and your weapon of last resort has been destroyed. Continuing this conflict will only result in more unnecessary loss of life. Surrender now, and the Dominion will be allowed to exist, under strict supervision." Threx's claws dug into the armrest of his chair. "Supervision." He spat. "You would dare humiliate us further." "This isn't humiliation," Kale replied evenly. "It's survival. You've underestimated humanity once. Don't make the same mistake again." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Threx's officers looked to him for direction, but he offered none. His mind churned with rage and desperation. He had never known defeat, never imagined a day when the Krell would be at the mercy of another species. Finally, Threx spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Prepare the fleet for one final push." "General," one of his officers asked hesitantly. "If we are to fall," Threx snarled, "we will do so as Krell. With honor." Back aboard the Resolve, Kal's tactical officer spoke up. "General Threx is mobilizing his remaining forces. They're preparing for a counteroffensive." Kal's lips curled into a faint smile. As expected, the grid shifted subtly, its energy signature fluctuating as the human fleet moved into new positions. It was a trap, one designed not to destroy but to capture. Kal's strategy was clear: to end the war not with annihilation, but with domination. Ambassador, came the voice of Counselor Vera over the Allied comms. You're letting them regroup. Why not strike now? Kel's reply was calm but firm. Because destruction breeds hatred. If we destroy the Krell now, their survivors will rebuild with vengeance in their hearts. But if we break them, truly break them, they'll never dare to rise again. The Allied commanders exchanged uneasy glances. The humans' methods were ruthless, but their logic was undeniable. The Krell's final assault began with a ferocity born of desperation. Their ships, though damaged, moved with the precision of seasoned warriors. Energy blasts lit up the void as they charged headlong into the human fleet. But the grid was waiting. The invisible energy field sprang to life, redirecting and dispersing the Krell's attacks. Human ships, small and agile, wove through the chaos, targeting critical systems with pinpoint accuracy. Within minutes, the Krell's offensive crumbled. On board the Oblivion's Edge, General Threx roared in frustration as his fleet fell apart around him. His officers begged him to retreat, but he refused. "We are Krell," he growled. "We do not run." Hell's voice interrupted over the comms. "General, your forces are defeated. Surrender, and this can end peacefully." Threx snarled, his pride warring with his survival instincts. But as he stared at the holographic display of his crumbling fleet, the weight of reality pressed down on him. With a heavy sigh, he slumped into his chair. "Transmit the surrender signal." The Krell's surrender sent shockwaves through the galaxy. For the first time in decades, the war was over. The Allied forces cheered, their relief palpable. But for humanity, it was merely another step in a calculated plan. On the bridge of the Resolve, Kel watched as the grid deactivated, its purpose fulfilled. His officers moved to secure the captured Krell ships, ensuring no resistance remained. "Ambassador," his communications officer said, "the Allied commanders are requesting a meeting to discuss the terms of peace." Kel nodded, his gaze distant. "Prepare the delegation. This war may be over, but the real work is just beginning." As the human fleet moved to consolidate their victory, one question lingered in the minds of their allies and enemies alike. What would humanity do next? The final hour. The Krell Dominion had surrendered, their mighty fleet shattered, and their pride in ruins. Across the galaxy, news of the humans' decisive victory spread like wildfire. But for the Allied forces, relief was short-lived. Humanity's next steps were shrouded in mystery, and their motives remained as opaque as ever. On board the Resolve, Kel stood before a gathering of Allied commanders in the War Council chamber. Holographic images of each species' leaders flickered around the room, their expressions a mix of gratitude, suspicion, and unease. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Counselor Vera, her scaled face unreadable, was the first to speak. "Ambassador Kel, you have delivered what you promised. The Krell are defeated, and the war is over. But now we must ask, what happens next?" Kel's face remained calm, his hands clasped behind his back. "What happens next?" he said evenly. "Depends on you." The counselors exchanged uneasy glances. Kel's tone was firm but devoid of arrogance, a stark contrast to the fearsome reputation humanity had cultivated over the centuries. Humanity did not join this war to gain territory or power. Kel continued. "We intervened to restore balance to the galaxy. The Krell's reign of terror is over, but the conditions that allowed their rise remain. If left unchecked, history will repeat itself." "What do you propose?" asked Commander Urel, his fur bristling with suspicion. "Another empire, one led by humans." Kel's lips curved into a faint smile. "No, empires are fragile. They crumble under their own weight. We propose a new system, one built on cooperation, transparency, and mutual accountability." The counselors murmured among themselves. Kel's words were logical, even inspiring, but they couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's true intentions were still hidden. Meanwhile, Aboard the Krell flagship Oblivion's Edge, General Threx sat in his dimly lit quarters, his mind a storm of conflicting emotions. He had spent his entire life believing in the Dominion's supremacy, its right to rule the galaxy through strength and fear. Now he was a defeated relic, his legacy reduced to ashes. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Kale. "General Threx," Kale said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. "We need to talk." Threx glared at him, his golden eyes burning with defiance. "I have nothing to say to you, human." Kale ignored the insult and sat across from him. "Your Dominion is finished, but your people are not. What happens to them now depends on the choices you make." Threx laughed bitterly. "Choices? You've taken everything from us. What choice do I have but to surrender?" Kale leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "You have the choice to lead. The galaxy will never forgive the Krell for their atrocities, but it can respect those who seek redemption. Help us rebuild. Show your people that strength lies not in domination, but in cooperation." Threx was silent, his claws tapping rhythmically on the table. For the first time, he saw humanity not as an enemy, but as something far more dangerous, a rival who understood the weight of leadership better than he ever had. In the days that followed, the humans began dismantling the Krell war machine. They did not destroy the ships outright, as many had feared. Instead, they repurposed the technology, integrating it into the Allied fleets and turning tools of war into instruments of peace. The humans' efficiency was both awe-inspiring and unsettling. But as the galaxy celebrated the end of the war, a new threat emerged, a darker legacy of the Krell Dominion. Deep within their archives, human intelligence discovered evidence of a hidden bioweapon, the Whalapard Protocol. This weapon, designed to alter the genetic structure of entire populations, could turn sentient beings into obedient slaves. Kale convened an emergency meeting with the Allied Council. The revelation sent shockwaves through the room. "The Whalapard Protocol was never deployed," Kale explained, "but its existence poses a significant risk. If it falls into the wrong hands, the consequences would be catastrophic." Commander Drell slammed his clawed hand on the table. "Then we must destroy it. Every trace of it." Kale nodded. "Agreed. But we must act quickly. The Krell left remnants of their empire scattered across the galaxy. There's no telling who might already be searching for this weapon." The final hour of the conflict was not spent on the battlefield, but in a desperate race against time. Humanity led a coordinated operation, deploying their unmatched technology to track and neutralize the remaining Krell facilities. The Allied forces, inspired by humanity's precision and determination, worked tirelessly alongside them. As the humans closed in on the last known facility housing the Whalapard Protocol, Kale himself led the operation. The facility, hidden beneath the surface of a desolate moon, was heavily guarded by rogue Krell loyalists who refused to accept defeat. The battle was swift and decisive. Human commandos, equipped with advanced adaptive armor, neutralized the facility's defenses with minimal casualties. Kale personally oversaw the destruction of the Whalapard Protocol, ensuring that no fragment of the weapon could ever be used. With the bioweapon eliminated, the galaxy finally exhaled. The war was truly over, and humanity had kept its word. The conflict had ended in 5 hours, and the Krell Dominion was no more. In the aftermath, the Allied forces gathered one final time to honor the lives lost and to discuss the future. Humanity's leadership, while at times unsettling, had proven to be not only effective but just. The galaxy, for the first time in centuries, had a chance at lasting peace. As Kale stood before the gathered leaders, his voice echoed with quiet resolve. "The galaxy has seen enough war. Let this victory not mark the end of a conflict, but the beginning of a new era. Together, we can ensure that no empire, human or otherwise, ever rules through fear again." The room erupted in applause, but in the back of every mind lingered a question. If humanity could accomplish all this in just 5 hours, What would they be capable of in 5 years or 5 centuries? The galaxy had changed forever, and humanity was at the center of it all. Peace at a price. The galaxy stood at a crossroads. The Krell Dominion, once the galaxy's most feared empire, had been dismantled. Their ships were repurposed, their weapons neutralized, and their leaders captured or subdued. Yet, as the stars began to heal from the scars of war, whispers of unease spread among the allied species. Humanity's rise had been swift, decisive, and unparalleled, but it had also been terrifying. The Galactic Council convened one final time to discuss the future. Representatives of the allied species sat in the Grand Chamber, their holographic images flickering under the soft glow of the starlight streaming through the ceiling. Humanity's ambassador, Kale, stood at the center of the room, calm and composed as always. Counselor Vera, ever skeptical, spoke first. Ambassador Kale, humanity's intervention ended the war. For that, we owe you our deepest gratitude. But we cannot ignore the question that lingers in every corner of the galaxy. What does humanity want? Cal's expression was unreadable as he stepped forward. Humanity wants what every species deserves: peace. Counselor Regan of the Tralaxians leaned forward, his fur bristling. Peace is a noble ideal, but your methods have left many of us uneasy. The grid, the pulse weapon, the dismantling of the Krell without widespread destruction. It was all too perfect, too calculated. What guarantee do we have that humanity won't one day turn its precision against us? Kale paused, letting the weight of the question hang in the air. Then he spoke, his tone steady. The guarantee lies not in words, but in actions. Humanity has had the means to dominate the galaxy for centuries, yet we chose isolation. When we intervened, it was not for conquest, but to prevent further suffering. The room fell silent, the counselors exchanging uncertain glances. Humanity's restraint was undeniable, but so was their overwhelming capability. It was a paradox they struggled to reconcile. Far from the council chamber, on the now quiet battlefield, General Threx sat in a secured human facility. The once proud leader of the Krell Dominion was a shadow of his former self, his defeat weighing heavily on him. Yet, as he gazed at the stars through his cell window, a strange emotion stirred within him: hope. A human officer entered the room, carrying a datapad. "General Threx," she said, her tone neutral. "Ambassador Kale has requested your presence at the council meeting." Threx turned, his golden eyes narrowing. "Why? To parade me as a trophy?" The officer shook her head. "To give you a voice." Threx was silent for a moment before standing. "Then let's see what the galaxy has to say." Back in the council chamber, Kale was delivering his final address. Humanity's strength does not come from our technology or our strategy. It comes from our understanding of what war truly costs. We have suffered, as you have, and we intervened not because we sought glory, but because we could not stand by and watch the galaxy tear itself apart. The doors opened, and all eyes turned as General Threx entered, flanked by human guards. A wave of murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some counselors were outraged at his presence, others intrigued. Threx stepped forward, his gaze sweeping the room. "I am not here to plead for mercy," he began, his voice steady. "The Krell Dominion deserved its fall. We ruled through fear and power, and we paid the price. But I stand here now to support what humanity has proposed." Shock spread through the chamber. Threx, the once mighty warlord, was aligning himself with his former enemies. Threx continued, "The humans have shown us something we refuse to see. That strength is not about destruction. It is about creating something better. The Krell were blind, but perhaps now we can see." Kale stepped beside Threx. "This is the future we envision. A galaxy not ruled by any single power, but united by shared purpose. To ensure this, humanity proposes the establishment of the Galactic Accord, a coalition where every species, Krell included, has a voice. Together, we will maintain peace, rebuild what was lost, and ensure that no empire rises to dominate again. The chamber erupted into debate. Some counselors embraced the idea. Others recoiled at the thought of trusting humanity, or the Krell. But as the hours passed, a fragile consensus began to form. In the weeks that followed, the Galactic Accord was established. Humanity took on the role of mediator, guiding the reconstruction of the galaxy with precision and care. The Krell, under Threx's reluctant leadership, began a path of redemption, contributing their resources and knowledge to the collective effort. But not all was at peace. In the shadows, dissent simmered. Rogue factions, unwilling to accept the new order, plotted in secret. And even among the allied species, whispers of distrust toward humanity grew louder. On board the Resolve, Kale stood at the viewport, watching as the first Accord fleet, a mix of human, Krell, and allied ships, set out on a mission of peacekeeping. His second-in-command approached. "Do you think it will last, Ambassador?" Kale didn't turn. "Peace is never permanent. It's something we must fight for every day. But for now, we've given the galaxy a chance." The officer hesitated. "And if they turn on us?" Kale's lips curved into a faint smile. "Then we'll remind them why they should think twice." As the fleet disappeared into the stars, the galaxy entered a new era. Humanity had ended the war in 5 hours, but their true challenge had just begun. They were no longer the mysterious outsiders. They were the stewards of a fragile peace, and the galaxy would never forget what they were capable of.